Good afternoon. My name is April Roberson, and I will be doing my oral presentation on The Adventures of Huck Finn by Mark Twain. Samuel Langhorne Clemens was born November the 30th, 1835, in a small town called Florida, Missouri. At age 4, he and his family moved to the town of Hannibal, Mississippi. Samuel's father passed away when he was only 12 years old. With no other option, he had to quit school and went to work at his brother's newspaper as a print and an editorial assistant. It was here that he developed his love for writing. At 17, Samuel left home for a printer's job in St. Louis. He became a licensed river boat pilot and developed his pseudonym Mark Twain, which means it's safe to navigate. Many of his stories are based upon his river travels. The river trade was brought to a standstill by the Civil War in 1861. At this time, he became a news reporter for many of the newspapers in the United States. He published his first short story in 1865, entitled The Celebrated Jumping Frog of Calaveras County. Twain wrote and published many books, short stories, sketches, and letters. One of the most famous and controversial books he published was Adventures of Huck Finn. Many people thought Twain was a racist, and he faced racial allegations. Twain, he died on April 21st, 1910, and he is America's most famous literary icon. Adventures of Huck Finn outraged many people. There have been many racial and racist implications over every part of the novel, and questions have been raised about the racial beliefs of Mark Twain. What people fail to realize is that Twain's parents owned many slaves themselves. He grew up listening to their stories and to their spirituals. Twain eventually employed an African American as his butler and treated him as his confidant. Twain used Adventures of Huck Finn as an eye-opener for the American people. He attacks the racism of 19th century America in his book. Jim, the slave, is a man of dignity, while most of the white characters are drunks, rapscallions, and criminals. Sanford Pinxer stated, yes, slavery is the most visible part of manifestations of man's inhumanity to man, not just shackles and the beatings, but also in the systematic way in which an entire people was reduced to property. While reading this novel, one may only think of slavery. Yes, it brings about the mistreatment of slaves, but what about Jim's character? Readers fail to see Jim as an intelligent, wise, and heroic man. Quirk wrote, Jim is compromised by circumstance, and he expresses himself with shrewd caution, but that does not mean he does not have a voice, or that he doesn't assert his own independence and integrity. Jim's simple nature belies a common sense that helps him choose the right path for Huck and him to follow. Huck ultimately treats Jim as an equal and as a friend, not as a black man who is only there to be of his service. But Huck is also confused about the rules of society. This is apparent when he begins to feel guilty for lying to the white men when they ask him if he is hiding any runaway slaves. Huck, he stayed true to his friend. He consciously risks eternal damnation for Jim. Twain made it clear that Jim was a good, deep-loving, human, anxious for freedom. He links the treatment of Huck and Jim as one and the same. Huck was a prisoner in his father's home. He was enslaved, isolated, and beaten. When Huck escapes, he immediately encounters Jim, doing the same thing. Jim convinces Huck that African Americans are deserving of freedom, and that equality is a goal for which we should all be fighting. Twain champions the American ideal of freedom, independence, and individualism. He brought out the importance of moral standards and self-sufficiency. freedom does not mean equality. Twain reminds us that not to be congratulating ourselves for starting a process in motion, but to realize that greater change is always necessary. To conclude, Ernest Hemingway once said, all modern American literature comes from one book by Mark Twain called Huckleberry Finn. All American writing comes from that. There was nothing before, there has been nothing good since. Thanks.